Today, I'm going to be sharing how to make the perfect sports video.
It's been great today, man. We got a show for y'all boys. Tune in.
This video is going to be split into two parts, one for shooting and one for editing. Let's get right into the first part. Arguably the most important part of any video is getting the right footage to edit with. You want a wide variety of interesting shots to use in the edit. So let's go over a few things you need in order to get engaging footage. So first up is camera movement. This is a complicated one because so much of sports videography is following movement. However, there are still some things we can implement to get better camera movement. First of all, for game action, I would highly recommend getting a fluid head tripod. This will help you so much with panning to follow the action and will just create so much smoother of shots. In my opinion, it's nearly impossible to film field sports handheld. So especially if you're doing soccer, football, baseball, I would highly recommend getting one of these heads. Personally, I place mine on a hi-hat, but you can also put it on a tripod if that is what you would prefer. I recently bought the Satchler XL fluid head, but I used to use the Manfrotto 502AH. I would highly recommend either of them. It's really just what you would prefer. And secondly, for camera movement, during warm-ups is when you can really experiment with your movement. I think the most important part of warm-ups is getting energy clips. This means I'm going to keep my camera moving and dynamic during warm-ups. If players are stretching, maybe I'll orbit them or bring my camera low to high. I'm going to be moving around with the players, trying to just capture as much dynamic footage as possible. I'm always looking for when the players are interacting with the camera, and to complement that, I want to make sure that I'm moving my camera to create high energy. No one wants to just watch a static shot of someone stretching, so warm-ups is when you can really move around and you're not constrained by following the action. Please consider subscribing. I put a lot of effort into these tutorials and I hope they help. Let's get into the next tip. So second, in terms of camera angles, you want to make sure you're switching up where you film as much as possible. I know it's tough, especially at college and pro levels. You can't really move around. You normally have to stay on the baseline or on the sideline. However, when possible, I highly recommend moving your angle. This means you can go from the baseline to the sideline, maybe up into the stands, but you don't want an edit with the same exact shot over and over again. Ideally, you want to be able to cut from high to low to the side. It'll just make for a much more engaging edit. Next, you want to make sure you get interesting shots. So you want to think about your viewer. Most of your audience can probably see the highlights of the game on YouTube or from the broadcast angle high up. Your job is to give them a perspective they've never seen. This means you want to emphasize getting close to the players and capturing the energy of the event. So for me, I personally love to get really close with a wide angle to the players during warm-ups. This creates a feeling of closeness and the player is interacting with the camera, so the audience is immediately engaged with something they've never seen before on the broadcast angle. And then along with this, you also want to switch up the angle. No one wants to see shoulder height footage of the game the entire time. I personally love to get low. It accomplishes two things. It switches up the angle and gives the audience, again, something they haven't seen before, but it also makes the athlete look more powerful. It's called a cowboy shot. It just gives them so much more aura. And the next thing you want to do in terms of shooting is changing your frame rate. So most videographers only shoot one frame rate the entire game. I was definitely a culprit of this. I would just shoot 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second the entire time. However, as I've progressed, I've realized the importance of using different frame rates. Personally, I love to shoot 24 frames per second during warm-ups now. This just creates for a much more cinematic motion blur, and then I can play it back at real time without it being as choppy. Then during the game, I shoot at 60 or 120 frames per second so that I can slow it down in post. Shooting in 24 FPS also has the added benefit of challenging me to not utilize slow motion as a crutch. For years, I always just put everything in slow motion and I just use that in every single video. Shooting in 24 FPS really made me think about composition and cinematography, and it's just, I think, allowed for better videos as a result. So my last big tip for getting the most out of shooting is manual focus. So I've talked about this before in my ball tracking video. However, I think manual focus is one of the most important things you can do to get better footage. Sports is so unpredictable, especially field sports. You never know when someone's gonna get out of frame or walk in front of you, and you really don't want your autofocus hunting. In my opinion, a slightly out of focus manual focus shot looks better than an autofocus shot that's hunting and going back and forth. And practicing manual focus will really give you the ability to control the frame. You can use the rule of thirds, track much easier. You're not constrained to where your autofocus point is. So I'm sure some of you who only use autofocus are a little intimidated by hearing this. However, I say ease into it. So your next game, just try it out for a couple plays, then go back to autofocus. Then as you get better, use it for more and more plays. I'd recommend checking out getting an external monitor and also use peaking, which lets you see what's in focus. But in 6 months from now, you're going to be very happy that you switched to manual focus. So I hope those tips on shooting help. Let's hop into how to edit the perfect video. So first, I want to give you a overall kind of blueprint or formula you can use. Of course, you can break this mold. However, for beginners struggling to make videos, I highly recommend following this kind of guide. So first, have the intro be 5 to 10 seconds, and you want this to include engaging B-roll shots, specifically warm-up shots, huddle shots, and any sort of emotion clips. The first seconds need to be the best clips possible to draw the audience in. I'm assuming that most of your work is going on social media, and you need to think about your audience and they're scrolling through. You want them to stop on your video. You need to think about that first second as kind of the thumbnail of your video. So you need that to really draw them in. So for this intro, you want to keep it short and then get it right into the game action. Around the 5 or 6 second mark, I normally like to have the bass drop of the song and then have my best play on that bass drop. So whether that's a goal or a touchdown or a dunk, I always sync that up with the beat drop. And again, this is because I want to draw the audience in. So I'm not going to save my best clips for last. I want to put the best clips possible first so that the audience wants to keep watching. Next, throughout the edit, you want to be alternating between angles. So like I said, in the shooting part, you want to go from the baseline to the sideline to a high angle. Just keep the audience on their feet. You don't want to just have the exact same angle every time. That's going to get very boring. And then you also want to alternate between B-roll and highlights. No one wants to just see a straight highlight tape. I think you want to include emotion clips, maybe the coach getting into it, the fans, bench reactions, the players' reactions. Interspersing these moments will make your video so much more engaging than just watching a highlight recap video. And then at the end, you want to wrap it up nicely with maybe a handshake line or the coach's speech or the players celebrating the win. You don't want to just end it abruptly. While 90% of people will not watch till the end, it is still important to wrap your video up nicely. So now you have the general blueprint for video, but let's get into some specific tips. First, I would recommend utilizing speed ramping. So like I said, in the shooting part, you're probably going to film the game action in 60 or 120 frames per second. Then during post, you can utilize speed ramping to slow down some of those parts. Speed ramping is basically just slowing down certain parts of a clip as opposed to turning the entire clip into slow motion. So for example, on a dunk or a tackle, you could slow it down right when that moment happens and then speed it up before and after. This is really just accentuating the moments you want it to. I prefer this over just using slow motion because it allows me to pick out the exact moment I want to slow down instead of having to slow down the entire clip. So next, make sure you color grade well. So I see a lot of videographers either do way too much color grading or not enough color grading. This is a way to really separate yourself from the rest. In my opinion, I really like these subtle grades that look realistic, but still add a little bit of pop to the video. I made some more in-depth videos on color grading if you want to check those out in both DaVinci Resolve and Premiere Pro. So check those out after the video if you want a more in-depth explanation on color grading. But I'm also going to be making a LUT pack pretty soon, so stay tuned for that and I will let you guys know when that drops. And then next, utilize transitions. Good transitions can take a video from good to great. And then in my opinion, the best transitions to use are natural whip pans and match cuts. When I say transitions, I'm not talking about built-in packs like glitch transitions or anything you can buy. In my opinion, those look a little tacky and not professional. So first, a match cut is basically where you're matching the action or movement of a clip. So for example, you could cut between a crossover and someone else's crossover, or a crossover and then from another angle, a different crossover, or you could cut between 2 shots or 2 tackles or 2 dunks. This is a super powerful way of getting more footage into a short video. It allows for much faster paced editing, and then you can also utilize clips that don't necessarily end in a made bucket or a highlight. So if I have a guy who had a nice crossover but then missed the layup, I could just take the beginning of the crossover, cut to another crossover, and then have him finish the highlight. This just makes the video so much more fast-paced and engaging, and you're getting more clips into a shorter time frame. For the whip transitions, if you're whipping your camera from right to left, you cut to another clip that is in the same movement from right to left. I did that in this video, and as you can see, all the cuts look seamless. For clips where you do not have camera movement that match, you can remake this in After Effects. I made a whole tutorial on that, so you can check that out after the video. I will link that in the description. But so overall, I gave you my tips on how to shoot and edit the perfect sports video. However, it is really up to you to find your own style. I'm not expecting you to follow this formula every time. I just wanted to give you the tools and basic understanding on how to make a good video. Let me know in the comments what kind of videos you guys want to see next. And again, check out those tutorials if you want a more in-depth tutorial on the color grading as well as the whip transition. Please like and subscribe, and thank you guys for watching.